Hi, I'm Daden, and these are my mini-stories. After my last diorama, which included the background and multiple miniatures, I wanted to work on a slightly smaller project. I've had a pretty specific idea in my mind for a while, which needs only a small plinth and 2 miniatures, an investigator and a ghost. For this project, I'm using these minis by MacLeod Studios, which are perfect for what I have in mind. In order to set the scene, however, I needed walls. I went back and forth between using MDF and acrylic, but after seeing how wobbly the thin acrylic sheet was, I ended up choosing MDF. However, I didn't have much of this MDF board left, so I had to use 2 pieces for one of the walls. Fortunately, I was able to hide the seam behind the plinth. After gluing the walls, however, I realized they weren't thick enough for my liking, so I grabbed some thicker MDF to create an additional layer, which I unfortunately forgot to record. Now, I knew I wanted a light source coming from the side of my diorama, so after planning the exact placement for a bit, I cut a window into one of the walls. Maybe I should have done this before gluing the walls, but I don't really plan every exact detail before starting a build. I like to improvise some stuff and forget some too. After everything was ready, I sanded everything down and used Tamiya putty to fill any gaps between the pieces. Once that was dry, I sanded everything a bit more before moving over to the characters. The miniature I'm using for the ghost does not sit flat since it's been designed to fit its specific base. So while I sand down the bottom of the mini, allow me to remind you to click the like button if you're enjoying the video so far and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more in the future. With the miniature slightly more stable, it was time to take both my ghost and investigator and prime them in black. I usually don't work like this, instead painting everything after the assembly is done, but since the diorama is smaller and took less time to craft, I wanted to take some extra time to push my painting skills and improve. Having the miniatures separate from the base will allow me to work on the otherwise hard to reach parts of the diorama, like the side of my ghost or walls of the room. And speaking of the room, it's time to go back to it and add some final details. First of all, I mixed some epoxy putty to sculpt the floor. This building is going to be abandoned and ruined, so I want a nice buildup of dirt and debris making the ground irregular. The soft layer of putty will also allow me to create a more stable connection to both minis. For this, I pressed my ghost and investigator into the base to create a notch for later. The building still felt pretty basic, so to add a bit more variation I decided to cut a simple frame for the window out of cardboard. As a final detail, I cut a piece of paper to create a torn wallpaper strip, which took less than 15 minutes and was, in my opinion, the coolest detail in this base. With everything ready, it was time to prime the base for painting, which means it's time for narrator Daden to tell us the tale of the drowned whispers.
Entry 45-BA-06, Paratracker Astor Valencia speaking. As per my brother's insistence, I have joined the case personally, and as of the time of this recording, I am about to enter what seems to be a mostly stable, if still abandoned and water-damaged, residential building near the edge of the lake. I will attach a map with specific directions to said building alongside this recording.
There are some things the humans were never meant to understand, things that many will never see or hear, for which they will remain joyfully ignorant. But some people are not as fortunate. Mediums, clairvoyants, psychics, there are many names we give to people such as them, and yet Astor and the other paratrackers in the organization refuse to be referred to as any of those titles. They do not simply act as intermediaries between the dead and the living, they do not see the past, present or future. What they perceive is something far more abstract, an energy much older than any human that flows all around the world, sometimes manifesting as voices, visions or other paranormal events as it collides with our own thoughts or emotions. It was one of these manifestations that guided Astor into a house near the end of the ruined town. He did not see or hear it, but rather felt the surge of energy as it rippled reality in front of him. This kind of anomaly was not uncommon in places such as this. Once occupied by a small town next to the lake, the area was now merely more than a collection of ruins after a sudden flood over 30 years ago caused the water to rise, burying the town beneath the lake until not too long ago. Most of the population were evacuated right before the water started to rise, although a few people were unfortunate enough to be caught by the flood, and the rest lost part of their lives as the waters took their homes. That kind of event can easily make an area unstable. Still, something felt different about this particular case. Other paratrackers might have missed it, but Astor noticed the subtle ripples covering the entire zone as he walked through the still wet yet mostly safe streets. Something huge had affected the area. It was that knowledge that made him follow the anomaly into the house. While the bigger ripples hinted at an enormous, dangerous manifestation, this one seemed different from it. Lost in between the reality of the present and the ripples mimicking the past, Astor climbed up the stairs, reaching what had once been a study. Astor saw the freshly painted and decorated walls, clean floors and simple desk, as they had been over 30 years ago. There, standing next to a window, he saw the figure of a woman, looking outside with a worried face. Her clothes and hair seemed drenched and rippled in the air as she moved, as if she was underwater. She turned toward him and spoke, her voice a distant echo, taking longer than it should have to reach him.
Can you see it?
He opened his mouth to speak, but a second voice, younger and more fearful, replied first.
It is there.
Astor turned, realizing the woman was not looking at him, but rather through him. His flashlight fell upon a kid, equally as covered in water as the woman, hovering above a simple chair, his eyes closed tightly as he focused. He must have been around 10 years old. They both seemed to ignore the water. This was not so much a vision of the past as it was a reinterpretation, an imitation created by the ripples. Astor realized what was happening. They were both like him. They were looking through the veil. The woman turned toward the window, and Astor followed her gaze to the distant lake. He closed his eyes, trying to focus, attempting to understand what it was they were looking at. He reached forward, displacing the veil, looking through it towards the water. And the water saw him. With a start, Astor opened his eyes just as the kid jumped up behind him, screaming,
It's us! It's us!
The woman turned toward the kid, and for a moment Astor thought she saw him. Her face went pale and she muttered something, but he missed it in his panic. He was looking at the lake where the water seemed to churn, suddenly starting to rise towards the town. It was at that moment that both woman and child suddenly looked up, opening their mouths in a horrified yet completely silent scream. Astor looked around the room, panicked. The clean place overlapped the vision of a ruined, whitewashed room with torn wallpaper and no furniture, the floor covered in debris and packed dirt. A vision of the future. No, the clean room was the vision, Astor reminded himself. This was what made his job difficult. It was easy to get lost in the veil, the ripples taking over one's reality. He forced himself to ignore the illusion, coming back to the present and escaping whatever nightmare that had been. Sunlight entered from a simple window with no glass, only part of its frame still attached to the wall. When had it gotten so late? He had entered the house at noon, and yet he could see the sunset from where he stood, the golden light blinding him as the room around him was swallowed in darkness. And there, in the distance, he got it. The lake's waters were rising, stretching toward the town, toward him. Just as he saw that, Astor's muscles tensed up, freezing him in place. The flashlight he held fell to the ground next to his voice recorder. The world around him became an overlapping mess, the past and present mushing together as a third, far greater manifestation loomed over him, breaching his mind, unraveling it. In his final moments, he saw the woman once again, her face accusatory, as he finally understood the last thing she had said. Something she had said not to the kid, but to the vision of an older man standing between them, flashlight in one hand, voice recorder in the other.
What have you done?
He tried to ask her what was happening, but no voice came. He screamed, but the silence was unbroken. All he could do was stand still, panicked, as the waters, controlled by whatever ruled this place, moved to claim his soul. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and a comment below to let me know, and subscribe for more. I'll be back next time with more minis to paint and more stories to tell. Take care and thanks for watching.